After I was reborn, Jack kept avoiding our engagement. Then, when Cindy and I both fell into the river, he didn't hesitate to pull her out. I was rescued by a simple-minded man who was passing by. To repay him for saving my life, I decided to marry him. Everyone's jaws dropped. You see, in my past life, Jack saved me and we went through with our marriage. Cindy, however, was saved by a local deadbeat. The guy was rotten to the core and wouldn't leave her alone. Not long after she married him, she drowned herself in the river. From that day on, Jack became a different person, cold and distant. After the economic reforms, he got rich from his business but framed my father for corruption, bankrupting my entire family. When I confronted him, his eyes were filled with scorn. What, playing the innocent now? If you hadn't clung to that engagement, would Cindy have died so young? She died so horribly. What right do you have to live so well? This time, I chose to let go and give them my blessing. But as I put on my red wedding veil, I could have sworn I heard him whisper hoarsely, "I regret it." My decision to marry the simple man who saved me from the river became the biggest news in the village. Did you hear? Chloe, the city girl, is going to marry that simpleton. Did she knock her head in the river? I bet he saw her naked. She has no choice but to marry him. My best friend, Laura, was furious. But I was calm. The end result is the same anyway. Who I marry doesn't matter. Simple is good. A simple man doesn't scheme. He won't drag my family to hell. Laura reached out to feel my forehead. Are you running a fever? Did it fry your brain? You could marry anyone, but you choose a simpleton? That son of a bitch Jack. He ignored his own fiancée to save Cindy. Even if you're too proud to marry Jack, there are plenty of good guys here. William's dad is a county official, and Joe is about to get a university scholarship. Any of them would be better than a simpleton. Laura knew about my engagement to Jack. When I fell in the water, she was the one screaming for him to save me. In my last life, Jack chose me. By the time he looked back, Cindy had already been pulled out by the village lowlife. He resented me for it, deeply. I can still see my father's stooped back as he was framed and sent to prison. This time Jack got his wish. He saved Cindy. And I would rather have a purely simple husband than a brilliant enemy. It's okay, Laura. Daniel might be a little slow, but he's handsome as hell. I'm not getting the short end of the stick. Stop crying your eyes out. Laura managed to smile through her tears, but still shot me a helpless glare. Just then, we heard voices outside. It was Jack and Cindy. Laura scowled, ready to stand up and kick them out. I smiled and pulled her back down. I had nothing to hide. If they had the guts to show up, I had the guts to see them. The door curtain lifted, and Cindy rushed over to grab my hand. Chloe, the whole village is saying you're going to marry that simpleton who saved you. It's all my fault. If only I had been more careful, Jack wouldn't have had to save me, and none of this would have happened. I slowly raised my eyes, my gaze meeting Jack's. Across a lifetime, we met again. Jack patted Cindy's shoulder with a look of pity. Cindy, you're just too kind. You're the most important person to me. What happens to anyone else is none of my business. If only Jack had been this honest in our last life, I would have rather drowned than be saved by him. In my past life, when Jack pulled me from the river, his eyes were as cold as a winter cave. Chloe, he'd said, you've got a lot of nerve. You'd even drag Cindy down with you just to force this marriage? I coughed up water, trying to explain, but then I saw Cindy shivering in Jack's coat. Jack, maybe Chloe didn't mean to. That one sentence froze the last bit of warmth in his eyes. The day after our wedding, he moved his things into the bachelor's quarters. And after Cindy died, he meticulously plotted my family's ruin. Thinking of this, I let out a cold laugh. This is my private business. I don't need either of you worrying about it. Cindy's tears started falling like broken pearls. She grabbed my wrist. Chloe, are you blaming me now? I know you and Jack had an engagement, but so many people saw him save me from the river. There's no first come, first served in love. The one who isn't loved is the third wheel. How about this? We'll compete fairly. Let's not get married yet. The three of us can see how things go. We can let Jack decide after he figures out his heart. I almost laughed out loud. We lived in a modern society of monogamy, and here she was, trying to shove this feudal, two women one man nonsense in my face. I watched them with a cold expression, one playing the victim, the other the protector. I finally understood. They hadn't come to apologize. They came to humiliate me, to laugh at the woman he'd abandoned. Before I could speak, Jack shot me a disdainful look, as if I were something dirty. Cindy, why are you even telling her all this? I will only ever love you. Looking at any other woman just disgusts me. A flash of triumph crossed Cindy's face before she quickly replaced it with a look of pity. Jack, don't be like that. Chloe is already suffering enough. I scoffed, my fingertips gently tracing the embroidered mandarin ducks on my wedding dress. Jack is right. A marriage should be about loyalty. I'm about to marry Daniel. I don't want any messy entanglements with other men. Cindy's eyes widened in shock. Chloe, you're really willing to marry a simpleton? What's wrong with a simpleton? At least a simple man won't hurt people. He won't scheme against them. Jack's face instantly turned ashen. He grabbed Cindy's wrist and stormed away. Cindy stumbled behind him, but not before turning back to give me a victorious smile. Laura stomped her foot in frustration. Those two. They were just here to gloat. She grabbed a broom and swept furiously where Jack had been standing, as if trying to sweep away the bad luck he left behind. I was scheduled to be part of the group wedding organized by the collective, alongside Jack and Cindy. It was a matter of pride. I dug out my savings and bought red cloth to sew my own wedding dress. The stitches were tight and dense, as if I were sewing 2 lifetimes of grievances into the fabric. Suddenly, the ding-ding of a bicycle bell echoed from the village entrance. It was Mrs. Wong, the most famous matchmaker in the whole county. Chloe. Great news. Her voice was so loud it drew half the village out to see what was happening. Trailing behind her were 4 young men, all dressed in new blue work uniforms, carrying large, red character-adorned camphor chests on their shoulders. The man in front held an object draped in red silk, cradling it like a precious treasure. Make way. Everyone make way. Mrs. Wong shouted. This is a rare one. When she pulled off the red silk, the crowd gasped. Oh my heavens. Mrs. Lee slapped her thigh. A Shanghai brand sewing machine. The whole set is here. Mrs. Wong counted proudly on her fingers. A Forever brand bicycle, a Shanghai brand watch, a Peony brand radio. She drew out the words for effect. All of it is the latest, most sought-after stuff from the county co-op store. More and more villagers gathered, chattering endlessly. Well, I thought she was marrying a simpleton. This is a bigger deal than a county official's wedding. TSK. Is she just putting on a show? Using her family's dowry as a bride price? These city folk are really something else. A few bachelors in the crowd were rubbing their hands together in envy. If I'd known, I would have jumped in the river to save her myself. This isn't marrying a wife, it's marrying a gold mine. Staring at the betrothal gifts, I was just as confused. Before I could ask, Cindy appeared, arm in arm with Jack, pushing through the crowd to the front. Cindy stared at the dazzling array of betrothal gifts, a flicker of jealousy in her eyes. Chloe, she said, raising her voice so everyone could hear. A daughter should be considerate of her parents. Even if you're marrying a simpleton, there's no need to break the bank and empty out the family savings, is there? She glanced pointedly at the gifts. That's a lot of debt to pay back. The villagers immediately started whispering, and the way they looked at me changed. TSK, so she's a spendthrift. These city kids really know how to waste money. Exactly. I think she's the simpleton. Why else would she blow her family's savings to marry one? A few of the single men started jeering. Hey, if I knew it was this easy, I'd have pretended to be a simpleton too. Might have tricked a city girl into marrying me. Yeah, that river water must have really gotten to her head. Everyone around me laughed loudly. Jack stood at the front of the crowd, arms crossed, a mocking sneer on his lips. Chloe, you listen up. Cindy is the only woman I will ever marry. As for you, he looked me up and down with contempt, like I was some cheap commodity. Even if you beg, I won't give you a title. At most, if you promise never to marry, I'll grant you special permission to be buried in our family's ancestral hall after you die. Cindy immediately feigned concern, gently tugging on Jack's sleeve. Jack, don't talk to Chloe like that. She's pitiful enough, being saved by a simpleton and now having to spend her entire fortune. Jack sneered. Chloe, You think marrying a simpleton will bring you a good life? With how slow he is, he probably doesn't even know what to do on a wedding night. Marrying him is just a life of celibacy. You'd be better off not marrying at all. I looked him dead in the eye. Jack, whether I marry or not, and who I marry has nothing to do with an outsider like you. Daniel saved my life. Even if he's simple, I'm willing to be with him. Jack let out a disdainful scoff. Chloe, are you that desperate for a man? Treating a simpleton like some kind of prize. Cindy put on a worried expression. Chloe, life with a simpleton won't be easy. If you run into any trouble, don't be too shy to ask for help. We're all city kids, after all. We'll help if we can. Hearing this, the villagers nodded in approval. That Cindy is a saint. No wonder she found a great man like Jack. It's her good karma. Exactly. Not like some people who act all high and mighty, but end up having to marry a simpleton. What's wrong with a simpleton? I retorted. At least a simpleton has a good heart. He doesn't scheme and plot and ruin people's families. I shot a cold glance at the gossiping villagers, no longer bothering to argue. I turned to the matchmaker. Mrs. Wong, let's move the gifts inside. Mrs. Wong gave me a mysterious wink and directed the young men to carry the bicycle, sewing machine, watch, and radio into the courtyard. I pulled her aside and whispered, "What is all this? Where did Daniel get the money?" A secret's a secret for a reason. Mrs. Wong grinned from ear to ear, lowering her voice. You'll find out tomorrow. The night before the group wedding, I was inspecting my dress one last time by the lamplight when I heard a soft creak at the window. I looked up to see Jack's silhouette on the paper window pane. Chloe, he whispered, his voice laced with his familiar arrogance. Are you really going to marry that simpleton? I sneered. Why not? Isn't that exactly what you wanted? Jack fell silent outside the window. The moonlight stretched his shadow long and thin. Finally he spoke, his voice hoarse. It's not what you think. It's just, if I hadn't saved Cindy that day, her life would have been ruined. My heart sank. The needle in my hand stopped moving. So that was it. No wonder his eyes were always full of poison when he looked at me. No wonder he swam straight for Cindy in that icy river, without a second thought. But now that he had what he wanted in this life, why was he here? The silhouette outside leaned closer, his voice suddenly soft. Chloe, listen to me. Marrying that simpleton will only hurt you. Just wait for me. Once I get things settled with Cindy, I won't abandon you. The needle fell from my hand, clattering to the floor. I stared in shock at the blurred figure on the window. Just a few days ago, in front of the whole village, he'd said Cindy was the only woman he would ever marry, that even looking at another woman disgusted him. What was this act now? I clutched my wedding dress so tightly the fabric wrinkled in my palm. The painful memories of my past life flooded back, my father's hunched figure as he was denounced, my mother's eyes cried blind, and the baby that was never born. Thanks for your concern, I said coldly. But how my life goes has nothing to do with you. I threw open the window, staring at Jack's stunned face. He stammered, trying to convince me. We have our history. There will always be a place for you in my heart. Chloe, don't be stubborn. Is being with me really worse than marrying that simpleton? You're right, it is, I said. I'd rather marry a simpleton than have anything to do with you ever again. The color drained from Jack's face, his expression twisting into a terrifying snarl. Chloe, don't be ungrateful. You want to marry that simpleton? Fine. Don't you regret it? The sound of Jack's footsteps had long faded into the night, but my mind was clearer than ever. The scissors snipped through the final thread. The twisted fate of 2 lifetimes, like that piece of fallen red thread, could not be reconnected, nor did it need to be. As dawn broke, the mirror reflected my weary face. The wedding dress was a piercing red in the morning light, but I hesitated to put it on. Though the future was uncertain, this was the only way I could sever the last possible tie to Jack. Chloe. Chloe. Laura burst through the door, breathless. Quick, look at the new notice the commune posted. You'll never guess who Daniel really is. I put down my comb and looked at Laura's face, flushed with excitement. It was the first time she'd worn such a joyful smile since I decided to marry Daniel. Who is he? I took the still damp, ink-scented notice from her hands. The morning light streamed through the window, illuminating the printed words. Report on the heroic deeds of war hero Daniel. Below was a faded old photograph. A young officer in a crisp uniform stood on a stage, his features bearing a faint resemblance to Daniel's simple, honest face. My fingers trembled, and the paper rustled to the floor. That flood in '75, Laura said, her voice shaking as she picked up the notice. He saved 3 kids from the co-op store, but a collapsing beam hit him in the head. When he woke up, a commotion suddenly erupted outside. I pushed open the window and saw Daniel, surrounded by villagers. His faded uniform was covered in medals, gleaming in the morning sun. Chloe, his voice was no longer halting, but shy and gentle. When I saved you from the river that day, I suddenly remembered a lot of things. It was like waking up from a very, very long dream. Laura whispered excitedly in my ear. The doctor said the shock of saving you helped him regain his memory. Looking at the Daniel before me, no, I should call him Daniel now, I was overcome with shock and joy. Daniel reached out his hand to me, and without a second thought I took it. His palm was broad and warm, and for the first time, I felt completely safe. The crowd of villagers at the gate exploded. The faces that had been waiting to see a joke were now frozen in disbelief. My God. The simpleton, no Daniel, he's a war hero? What kind of luck does Chloe have? One minute she's dumped by Jack, the next she's picked up a war hero. No wonder. I knew something was up with that bicycle and sewing machine. A simpleton couldn't afford that. Turns out he was a hero in disguise. I heard Daniel won 3 first-class merits. His salary must be hundreds of dollars a month. Chloe's hit the jackpot. This is 100 times better than being with Jack. The old village chief tapped his pipe and raised his voice. Weren't some people laughing at Chloe for marrying a simpleton? Now look who the real simpletons are. I sat on the back of Daniel's bicycle, my hands gently wrapped around his waist. His back was straight and strong, and his faded uniform billowed in the wind, carrying the faint scent of soap. This time, fate had been kind to me, giving me this precious gift. A man who would jump into a raging river for me. A hero who protected his people with his life. A partner who gave me peace. As our small procession reached the stone bridge at the edge of the village, we ran right into Jack and Cindy, walking side by side. He looked up and saw Daniel on the brand new Forever brand bicycle, and for a moment, he didn't even recognize him. Who's this? Jack squinted, his eyes scanning Daniel's crisp uniform and the medals on his chest. Is someone else getting married today? Mrs. Wong, the matchmaker, laughed loudly. You're a busy man, Jack. You must have forgotten. Today is Chloe's big day too. The color drained from Jack's face. What did you say? You're lying. There's no way Chloe is marrying someone else. Jack trembled as he stumbled forward. When he saw me in my wedding dress sitting on the back of the bicycle, his eyes welled up with tears. I shot him a cold glance and turned my head away. In this life, he had gotten his wish and was marrying Cindy. He would never have the chance to harm me or my family again. Suddenly, Jack threw his arms out, blocking the bicycle. Chloe, his voice was a ragged mess. Are you really going to marry this Daniel? I frowned, confused by his question. Jack, is there a problem? Jack's lips trembled violently. Chloe, don't marry him. He reached out to grab my arm, but Daniel blocked him. Jack, Daniel's voice was firm and steady. Please step aside. Don't delay the ceremony. Jack clenched his jaw as if he'd made a grave decision. Daniel, Chloe and I have had a misunderstanding. She can't marry you. The onlookers were too shocked to speak. They couldn't believe Jack would dare to disrupt the marriage of a soldier in public. Daniel just smiled confidently and turned to look at me. Chloe, do you want to go with him? Jack looked at me, his face a mask of desperation. I met his tear-filled eyes and shook my head firmly. No, I don't. Jack swayed, nearly collapsing. He stared at me in disbelief. Daniel chuckled softly. Did you hear that? She doesn't want to go with you. Crashing a wedding is one thing, but a groom crashing his own wedding to steal another bride is something else entirely. Daniel pedaled the bicycle forward, carrying me away. Jack lunged forward like a madman, but a few strong villagers held him back. Chloe, he roared, his voice raw with anguish. Have you forgotten all the years we had together? Why are you marrying someone else? I didn't look back. I just held on to Daniel's waist even tighter. His warmth seeped through his uniform, making me feel incredibly secure. At this point, what history was there left to speak of? He didn't remember our past when he was destroying my family in our last life. Why was he playing the devoted lover now? He didn't want to stop me from marrying Daniel because he couldn't bear to lose me. He just couldn't stand the thought that something he once held in the palm of his hand was now someone else's treasure. That evening, after we got our marriage certificate, Daniel and I sat under the old locust tree at the edge of the village. Daniel, I said, tracing the words voluntary union on the certificate, debating whether to explain my history with Jack. But he just gently took my hand. You don't have to say anything. It wasn't your fault. I understand. I looked up at his strong profile. Then why? Why were you willing to marry a stranger? Daniel gazed at the wheat fields in the distance, his eyes gentle. That day at the river, I saw you try to save that drowning child, and you almost got swept away yourself. Later, when you were sick with a fever, you kept mumbling, "Dad, run." I thought to myself, this girl must be carrying so much pain. A locust leaf drifted down onto our clasped hands. He continued, and then, I watched you teaching the village kids to read and carrying water for the elderly widows. I thought, even if I stayed a simpleton my whole life, it would be a blessing to spend it with someone like you. Daniel, my voice trembled, the truth is the words caught in my throat. How could I tell him that I had only approached him to escape the tragedy of my past life? He seemed to sense my unease, and his warm hand tightened around my trembling fingers. Chloe, look. He pointed to the swallows returning to their nests in the distance. A bird doesn't ask why it chose this branch for its nest. A flower doesn't ask why the sun shines on it. Some connections don't need a reason. A tear fell onto our joined hands. I took a deep breath, deciding to tell him the whole truth. At first, I admit, I was just using you. To my surprise, he laughed softly. I know. But I believe that sincerity is repaid with sincerity. As twilight deepened, the first star appeared in the sky. I reached out and smoothed a wrinkle on his uniform. From now on, I said, word by word, my heart has room for only one person, you. The next day at work, the village gossip was more lively than ever. Oh, you should have seen it. Mrs. Wang exclaimed, sifting grain. Jack was dead drunk outside the bachelor's quarters last night. Broken bottles everywhere. Mrs. Lee lowered her voice conspiratorially. I heard Cindy was so mad, she smashed their new enamel basin. Jack didn't even try to calm her down. They fought half the night. Over at the threshing ground, Jack was hunched over, recording work points, with dark circles under his eyes. Cindy brought him his lunch, her own eyes red and swollen. The moment they saw each other, sparks flew. The people who were there for the wedding night celebration got a real show. The scorekeeper said, a cigarette dangling from his lips. The bride was crying and screaming she was going back to her mother's, and the groom was just squatting by the door chain smoking. That wasn't a marriage, it was a declaration of war. I was bundling rice stalks when a shadow fell over me. Daniel had appeared behind me, holding out a small, woven straw fan. Take a break. The metals on his uniform glittered in the sun, so brightly that Jack, not far away, had to turn his face away. The old village chief walked over, tapping his pipe. See, this is what a real marriage looks like. Some people just don't know how good they have it. Cindy's faint crying could be heard from the direction of their new home. But Daniel and I just smiled at each other and went back to work. In the golden waves of rice, our shadows leaned closely together. Early one morning, while I was hanging laundry in the yard, Cindy burst in, her hair a mess, and pointed a finger at me, her eyes red. It's all your fault, you vixen. Now Jack won't even look at me. Before I could say a word, Daniel stepped in front of me. He was so tall that Cindy's blustering immediately deflated. Cindy, his voice was stern but not angry, watch what you say. Interfering with a soldier's marriage is a crime. Cindy was speechless. Just as she was about to throw a tantrum, Jack hurried over. His face was ashen, with dark circles under his eyes. Come back with me, he said, grabbing Cindy's arm, only to receive a sharp slap across the face. Whose name were you calling last night? Chloe. Even in your dreams, you're calling for Chloe. Cindy clung to the wooden gate, refusing to leave. I'm not going. I want this homewrecker to explain herself today. Jack tried to pry her fingers off, sweat beading on his forehead. Stop making a scene. A scene? Cindy laughed hysterically, pulling a pair of scissors from her pocket. This is a scene, she shrieked, about to slash her own wrist. The crowd of villagers pointed and whispered, "TSK, TSK, trying to kill herself 3 days after the wedding. I heard they didn't even consummate the marriage. What did Jack do to deserve this?" Jack's face was livid. He suddenly hoisted the struggling Cindy over his shoulder like a sack of potatoes and started walking away. One of Cindy's shoes fell off, but she was still screaming curses. "Put me down. You heartless bastard, Jack. If it weren't for you." As they struggled past the threshing ground, Cindy grabbed onto a rack of drying corn, pulling herself and the entire rack down into a mud puddle. Jack tried to pull her up but was dragged down with her. The sound of his new pants ripping all the way up his thigh echoed across the yard. "Serves them right." Mrs. Wong spat. "A pair of dogs. Instant karma." I stood at my gate, watching the miserable couple retreat amidst the laughter of the crowd. Daniel gently took my hand. "Don't look. It'll dirty your eyes." His palm was warm and dry, bringing a strange sense of peace. The sound of shouting from Jack's house faded into the distance, as if it were coming from another world. The days passed, but Jack's harassment only grew worse. During the autumn harvest, while Daniel was away at a meeting in the county town, he cornered me at the threshing ground. He was unshaven, but he held a bouquet of wild roses, my favorite flower in my past life. "Chloe," he said, his voice trembling, "I know you came back to. Fate gave us a second chance so we could make up for the regrets of our past life." I laughed coldly, tearing the roses apart one by one and grinding them into the dirt with my heel. "Jack, you're truly disgusting right now." His eyes reddened instantly. "I know you hate me, but this time?" "You what?" I cut him off. "You haven't had the chance to destroy my family yet? Or you haven't married Cindy yet? You already got your wish, so why are you still bothering me? Or are you just one of those people who's never satisfied with what they have?" Jack looked like he'd been struck by lightning, staggering back a step. Just then, the sound of Daniel's bicycle bell drifted from the distance. Jack suddenly grabbed my wrist. "Come with me. Let's go right now. I can give up everything." "Let go." I yanked my arm away. "Your everything? Look over there." I pointed to Cindy, who was frantically searching for him nearby. "That's all you have left." Daniel strode over, the metals on his chest shining in the sun. Jack flinched like a mouse seeing a cat, and instantly let go of me. "Jack," Daniel's voice was stern, "if you harass my wife again, I'll report your conduct to the authorities." Jack's face was pale, but his eyes were still fixed on me. "Chloe, look me in the eye and tell me you feel absolutely nothing for." "Nothing," I said, cutting him off. I turned and took Daniel's arm. My husband, my hero, has only ever been Daniel. Unable to get anywhere with me, Jack started drinking all day, neglecting his accounting duties. And Cindy, watching Jack's decline, felt the poison of jealousy burn hotter and hotter. One late autumn evening, I was returning from our private plot with a basket when I saw Cindy lurking suspiciously by our courtyard wall, whispering to Gus, her husband from my previous life. Gus had a cigarette dangling from his lips and was grinning sleazily, occasionally glancing into my yard. I quieted my steps and slipped behind a haystack, where I could faintly hear Cindy's voice, seething with hatred. "Tomorrow night, they're showing a movie in the village. Everyone will be at the threshing ground. You find a chance to drag her into the woodshed behind the hill. When it's done, I'll give you $20. Gus chuckled. "Cindy, you really hate her that much?" Cindy's voice was chillingly cold. "If it wasn't for her, would Jack have become like this? If I can't have what I want, neither can she." I clenched my basket, my nails digging into my palms. That Cindy. She couldn't keep her own man's heart, so she decided to blame me. The next morning, I accidentally ran into Cindy while washing clothes by the river. She was downstream, slamming a washing paddle into the water, as if she were beating my head. "Cindy," I said with feigned concern, "you look awful. Didn't you sleep well?" She shot up, her eyes like poisoned daggers. "None of your business." I slowly wrung out my clothes. "I heard Jack's been going to the county town a lot lately. You don't think?" "Shut up." She stood up with a splash, soaking her shoes. "Chloe, don't be so smug. You think you're so great just because you married a war hero? I just smiled, picked up my basket, and walked away, hearing her spit viciously behind me. Just you wait. That evening, the village loudspeaker started announcing the movie. I stood at the window, watching Cindy, all dressed up, head toward the threshing ground. She didn't forget to shoot a look at Gus on her way out. Is everything set? I asked Daniel, who was sharpening a sickle. He looked up, his gaze calm. The local militia is already in position behind the hill. I've also notified the commune police. Are you sure you want to be the bait? I smiled. If I don't see Cindy reap what she sows with my own eyes, how can I ever be at peace? Halfway through the movie, I pretended I had to use the outhouse and walked off by myself. Sure enough, just as I rounded the granary, Gus and another lowlife jumped out from the shadows, grabbing me by both arms. Shoo! Gus reeked of alcohol. Chloe, we're gonna take you somewhere fun. I pretended to struggle in a panic. Let me go. What are you doing? Don't be scared, he said, his greasy hand touching my face. In a minute you'll, AGH. Before he could finish, a bright flashlight beam shot out. Daniel and 3 militiamen rushed out, their rifle barrels gleaming in the moonlight. Get the scumbags! Daniel yelled. Gus was so scared he wet his pants on the spot. The other guy tried to run but was taken down with a leg sweep. The news that Gus had been caught spread through the village like wildfire. The next morning before dawn, Gus's parents, along with a mob of relatives, showed up at Cindy's door. Cindy, you curse! Gus's mother wailed, sitting on the ground and slapping her thighs. If my Gus goes to prison, I'll make you pay. The moment Cindy opened the door, Gus's father threw a bucket of manure right at her. Amidst the stench, Gus's sister lunged forward and grabbed her hair. You slut! You can't control your own man, so you go after my brother. More and more people gathered to watch. Cindy, covered in filth, tried to wipe her face as her hair was pulled and her blouse was torn. She looked around frantically and suddenly saw Jack walking down the alley. Jack! Jack, save me! She screamed, as if he were her last hope. But Jack didn't even slow down. He walked straight toward my house. He was carrying a net bag with 2 cans of fruit and a packet of brown sugar, rare goods from the co-op store. Chloe. He knocked on my gate, his voice deliberately gentle. I heard you had a scare last night. I brought you something. Get out, Daniel said, stepping out of the house. Jack backed away sheepishly, but he hadn't given up. I just came to see if Chloe was hurt. Just then, Cindy's heart-wrenching screams came from the distance. I turned to see her being held down by Gus's family, her face covered in scratches, her clothes torn to shreds. But her eyes were locked on us, especially on the things in Jack's hands. Her gaze was as venomous as a poison blade. Jack, are you even human? She suddenly found a burst of strength, broke free, and rushed toward him. I did all that for you, and this is how you... Slap. A loud slap cut off her screams. Jack's face was livid. You crazy bitch. If you ever dare to touch a hair on Chloe's head again, I'll kill you. Cindy held her cheek, her eyes wide with disbelief. Her lips trembled, and she let out an inhuman shriek before lunging at Jack, and they began to fight. I hurt people for you. I disgraced myself for you. And this is how you treat me? Her nails clawed bloody lines down Jack's face. The villagers pointed and commented, some even cracking melon seeds. Mrs. Wong's voice rose above the din. When dogs fight dogs, they both get bitten. The farce finally ended when the militia arrived and took Cindy away. As she was being escorted to the commune for investigation, her hair was disheveled, her eyes were vacant, and she kept muttering, "It was Chloe, it was all her fault." And Jack, under the contemptuous stares of the crowd, slunk away in disgrace. But I knew his type. This wasn't over. Sure enough, that night, I got up and saw a dark figure outside our wall. It was Jack squatting there, surrounded by empty liquor bottles. "Chloe," he slurred drunkenly, "I know you can hear me. I was wrong. I was really wrong." I gently drew the curtain. Behind me, Daniel's warm arms wrapped around my shoulders. Want me to chase him off? No. I leaned into his embrace, listening to Jack's drunken sobs outside. Let him cry. Compared to what I suffered, this little bit of penance doesn't even cover the interest. Daniel's arms tightened. The faint, clean scent of soap from his clothes made me feel completely safe. The sound of the night watchman's clapper echoed in the distance, once, twice, like a death knell for the past. Later, I heard that Cindy was sent to a labor camp for inciting a crime. During a heavy rainstorm, she tried to escape, fell into a ravine, and was paralyzed for life. Jack, due to his constant drinking, messed up the village accounts and was sent to do hard labor at a remote forestry station. As for Daniel and me, honey, look. He came back from the county town beaming, holding up a paper with a red stamp. The leadership has assigned us a house in town. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the transfer order. He had been appointed deputy head of the county militia, and I was given a job as a technician at the new textile mill. On the day we moved, the entire village came to see us off, congratulating us endlessly. The most common sentiment was, "I always knew you two were a perfect match. 1,000 times better than that other pair." Our new home had a small yard, where Daniel planted a pear tree. He said it would blossom next spring, and he would build me a swing under it. Every weekend, we would ride our bicycle to the river. He would fish, and I would read. Sometimes we'd run into people from town, and they would respectfully greet us as Deputy Head Daniel and Technician Chloe. And late at night, I would lie in his arms, listening to his steady heartbeat, and I would always think of that morning I fell in the river. Fate had given me a second chance, not to drown in revenge, but to meet the man who was willing to jump into an icy river for me. Outside the window, the pear tree's new branches swayed gently in the moonlight. And all the suffering of my past life had finally faded into a distant dream. The end.